Hi, I'm Jen, and today we're going to learn about authoritarianism. Imagine a world where one powerful leader or a group of leaders makes the vast majority of decisions in a nation state. Personal freedoms such as the right to privacy, to assemble in groups, to vote, and to speak one mind are significantly curbed, if not completely monitored and censored for the sake of national security, the preservation of the state, or simply to help those in power keep their power. Your phone records could be seized for little to no reason other than a vague suspicion of being a terrorist. Your private life could come under severe scrutiny for speaking out against policies or laws which you find to be unjust or morally reprehensible. And you could be jailed, imprisoned, or even killed for assembling with like-minded citizens in protest against corruption and injustice. Now, imagine that in this nation, your leaders are revered and elevated to almost godlike status, and the instruments of political power, which were once maybe slow to enact change, are now wielded with a fierce swiftness that allows for whole swaths of a nation's laws and procedures to change in an instant with the signing of one paper by one person or one small group of people. What are the potential downfalls of such a system? How do such seemingly oppressive systems come to be? And are there any benefits? The form of government in which all of this can become a reality is called authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a blanket term for systems characterized by highly centralized power structures and the use of political, economic, and social institutions that reject political and social plurality, individual rights, and democratic values in order to establish and/or preserve political, social, and national structures and beliefs. In the 20th century, it was thought that capitalism, which demands economic freedom, could only exist within a democratic state. Today, China is reshaping our understanding of the way capital and government can operate together. China has an authoritarian system in which one party politically controls the direction of society, yet free market principles are leading to massive economic growth. We call this authoritarian capitalism, and it's challenging the Western system's dominance over economic possibility. In an authoritarian society, citizens experience significant reductions of their civil liberties. This includes reductions in their privacy, their speech, their legal rights, assembly, and suffrage. Meanwhile, the rule of law, as well as the separation and balance of powers among different branches of government, deteriorate, or they simply don't exist at all, doing away with slow-moving checks and balance systems in order to put power in the hands of a few people, or in some cases throughout history, a single person. People often wonder how a population could allow for such a potentially oppressive government to rule over them without rebelling immediately. Well, the reality is that most authoritarian regimes tend to emerge slowly out of necessity due to the need for immediate action and emergency action in response to crisis situations that often occur in countries that otherwise have normally functioning or semi-functioning governments, where the powers are traditionally separated amongst different branches and offices. However, when catastrophe occurs, most people become filled with fear and look to their government for help, which motivates them to give up more and more of their civil liberties so that the government can step into non-traditional roles to help solve their emergency. This centralization of power within the government happens almost always in the name of safety and security for its citizens. Think about major disasters and polarizing issues, pandemics, economic shifts and crashes such as the Great Depression, war, fiery social movements, institutional and/or moral corruption, and more. All of these disruptors create the kind of chaotic and emotionally charged environments in which authoritarian regimes can swoop in and plant their roots. But this protection often comes with a steep cost. The more and more citizens sacrifice their civil liberties, the more power is centralized into the hands of the government. This willingness to sacrifice freedom for the sake of safety can create a cycle in which governments can become massively powerful and oppressive, while average citizens are left powerless to enact change. This is the worst case scenario, and can be seen in countries like North Korea today, where all aspects of the lives of citizens are controlled and monitored. Laws are harsh and unforgiving. Citizens have little to no say over what occurs within their government. Of course, disasters happen everywhere, and some governments may not take advantage of these crisis situations to consolidate power. Most people would like to believe their government does what it's supposed to do, serve its citizens well, and then relinquish power after the disaster has subsided. But in the case of authoritarian regimes, the government will continue to hold on to their emergency powers, and they may even manufacture further disasters to manipulate the public into giving up even more and more of their freedoms. Propaganda is the presentation of information which can be one-sided information in order to promote a social or political cause. Propaganda encourages an audience to form their ideas around a particular viewpoint or perception. Now, sometimes it's not a rational response, but an emotional response, which is sought by those who push propaganda in order to motivate people to go out and do something that may actually be against their best interests. But propaganda is a beloved, much-used tool of authoritarian regimes. Typically, and often in times of war, powerful leaders and governments will push propaganda onto their citizens in order to form an enemy image which attempts to rally as many people as possible within their country against one common foe. Then, this majority can be called upon to follow the leader's course of action with unwavering loyalty. In particularly notable cases, the leader may call upon the image of the other to reinstill fear of this outside group who are accused of opposing a regime's narrative or story that a country's national sovereignty or security is being challenged. These accusations can drive a fearful populace into giving up even more of their rights, as well as promote the public dehumanizing and demonizing of one or more minority groups. Many in these selected groups are eventually forced to emigrate to other countries or risk facing persecution in their home nation. And it's important to remember that any group can become the enemy image. Strong authoritarian leaders often employ the use of stereotypes, generalizations, racism, nativism, homophobia, conspiracy theories, and other unprovable, intolerant, and plainly bigoted ideologies in order to add polarizing elements to their narratives, which further solidifies the unwavering loyalty of their proponents. All it takes is one bold, charismatic, and convincing leader to point out that a minority group is the cause of the nation's problems. That's a method known as scapegoating. And citizens who've bought into that narrative follow him or her blindly out of fear, or a sense of patriotic duty, religious obligation, or sometimes even out of pure hatred. Meanwhile, those who disagree are left unable to voice their opinions and assemble due to public shaming or the nation's disintegrating civil liberties. This unfortunate cycle can continue until there's a fair and transparent process to replace the regime, or a war, a coup d'etat, and/or a rebellion. Another common tool authoritarian leaders use to consolidate power is the creation and worship of the model citizen, or aggregate citizen. Diversity is reduced to this national citizen as an ideal, as their collective identity. Typically, the aggregate citizen is represented by ethnic and/or racial markers and often embodies aspects of the authoritarian leader's persona. Oftentimes, this loss of individual identity is confused with the belief of the welfare of the group, community, or nation as the goal of society. But a society with no individuals could never truly be a community. A healthy society is one in which individual freedoms create and are fulfilled by collective goals and values of the community, not separated and destroyed.
Hey, hey.